The Magnificent Battle, Merlin, Arthur's Court, and the Mistress of Time, by the Magus. Read by the Magus. Chapter 8, A Much Too Realistic Game. Damon was pretty proud of himself. He pretended to be asleep when Grambo, that's what they call their grandmother, came to check on the kids who she thought were asleep in the playroom at the farm. Seeing neither signs of movement nor the faint glow of electronic devices that might be hidden under covers, she thought all was well and she went to bed. Damon waited. When he was convinced that no one would notice, Damon got up quietly and slunk like the Grinch into Papa's study, a room he called the doghouse, and cranked up Papa's computer. He played games, some of which were not allowed by his parents, until the early hours of the morning. There was one game which was especially fun. It was about knights and dragons and magicians. Damon began playing and making sense of the rules. He was about to get the hang of jousting when the screen flickered and on it appeared the very haggard-looking face of a bearded man in a pointed hat. The face, one that Damon thought must be an animation, was extremely realistic. It seemed to look into Damon's face as if he were actually looking at him, with a very strange expression. His eyes were piercing, almost as if he were asking a question of Damon, or of himself. It was unnerving to Damon, who reset the game and started over. Before he had a chance to get into the game again, the same haggard face appeared. Damon was so unnerved that he closed the game, called it a night, and went back silently to bed. As he drifted off to sleep, he thought of how wonderful it had been to have all that computer time to himself. The only pleasantness had been that face. No matter how he tried, he couldn't quite get it out of his mind. A short while later, the television screen flickered and glowed with a faint light. If they had been awake, the kids would have seen that face, that same face that Damon had seen in his game. The face looked at each kid as he or she slept. The face saw Mikhail curled up on a sofa with a large gray cat. Asher and Krista on fold-out beds. Asher was with a small white dog, and Krista had a larger gray one. He saw Fergus with a long-legged brown dog, and Damon with the face's favorite, a large black cat. Only the large black cat seemed to notice the face as it stretched and looked out over the 5 kids. The hands that accompanied the face made some strange gestures. The cat stood and gave several muted meows toward the television, as if giving the face important information. A faint smile appeared to the edges of the mouth of the face, as if he had learned the answer to a question or had been convinced of something very important. Then the screen flickered off. The cat licked for a minute, then settled down, delighted to have been of assistance to one as powerful and legendary as the face. The next morning, it was really hard for the kids to get up. Damon was very tired. He finally got rousted out by his noisy brother and sister, Mikhail and Krista, especially Krista, who could be very noisy, and his cousins, Asher and Fergus. They were all in the playroom at the farm, watching the cartoon channel. A book about King Arthur and his knights was lying on the floor. Asher seemed to be leafing through it. Then she slammed the book closed. Damon noticed her frown. "What's the matter, Asher?" he asked. Asher didn't really want to answer, but what she saw was so troubling that she finally did. "Do you remember pictures in books from the Harry Potter movies?" she asked. "You remember how the people in them would smile and wave as if they were alive in the pictures?" "Yes, I remember," Damon answered. "Well, I just saw that in this book. I just saw a picture come to life with an old bearded man who seemed to be studying my face, and when I turned the page, he appeared in the next picture, too. Let me see that book, Damon said. Turning to somewhere in the middle, he looked at picture after picture. He began to wonder if Asher were losing her senses. When he turned the next page, there was that face again. It was the same face he had seen on the computer, and it was moving. Damon slammed the book closed and threw the book under the sofa. He looked at Asher. He didn't have to say anything. She knew he had seen it too. They both went back to watching the cartoon channel. It was too freaky. It wasn't long before the television betrayed them too. This time the kids were wide awake. Suddenly, there was a flicker on the screen, and instead of the cartoon channel, there was the face. It seemed to look around the room, stopping to look at Mikkel, Fergus, and Krista. Fergus picked up the remote and changed the channel. The face was on the next channel, and the next, and the next. After a couple of changes, Fergus turned off the television. "There's something wrong with the television," he said. "Let's go see if breakfast is ready." "Good idea," Asher and Damon affirmed as they jumped up and headed for the safety of the kitchen. There was something strange going on, and they didn't like it. Little did they know that it didn't matter whether they liked it or not. It was only the beginning. After breakfast, the kids returned to their room in the back of the house. Damon noticed another book, probably one of their grandpa's, about life in the Middle Ages. He opened it to a description of a castle, and it used words he was unfamiliar with: bailey, keep, battlements, donjon. Damon typed the words into his phone and began looking for definitions. Damon was smart. He knew that he was, and he had already learned that he wanted to know everything that it was possible to learn. "Let's see," he said to himself. "Keep. Another word name for the Great Tower. Okay, how about donjon? Oh, the same as keep, but dungeon is something else, an underground prison or vault. I'll bet those things were horrible, stinky places. I'd hate to ever be in one," Damon thought to himself. Then, as he turned the page, there was the face again. Damon tried to turn the page, but as he tried to touch it, his fingers seemed to pass right through. Then the book slipped through his lap onto the floor, still open to the same page. He looked into the eyes of the bearded face. He became aware of a weird, pulsing sensation in his body as he seemed to feel very light, as if he could float. He thought he heard Asher saying something to him about taking her hand, but he was powerless to respond. His head was spinning in flashing alternations of light and dark, as he seemed to be flying. Then there was darkness.